ladies. Come on.
Hi.
Big day today?
Yeah.
I've been going to Vietnam since 1970 to the fall of Saigon in 75. I realised when I first went to Vietnam what wonderful people these were. Now, they've been at war for many, many years. They were attacked by the Mongolians, the Chinese, the French, the Japanese, the Americans, the Australians, and so on. What I noticed of wandering around Hanoi, celebrating 1,000 years old city, was the country is together and it's at peace. There's tremendous change in Hanoi. The Western influence, I noticed. All the big fashion labels have got stores there. When I was there before, I worried about the Western influence, but the thing I do notice, and after talking to people, they want Western things. They want to go and buy nice clothes. They want to have more money. They want to have a better life.
This Bentley here would cost roughly about $600,000 US to buy. That's in Vietnam. 30 years ago, you'd never see anything like this. You're lucky to see cars in the streets, let alone a Bentley.
When I was in Hanoi in 1973 during the war, the tallest building was about 4 stories high. I went out of the centre of Hanoi for about 20 minutes drive to see this new construction going on. They're putting buildings up 70 floors high. Not just one building, but dozens of buildings. There was one major road out there. It reminded me of Fifth Avenue in New York. I never thought I'd see that. Never. I went for a walk around the lake area in Hanoi, this beautiful lake that is in the middle of the city. People were celebrating the proudness, the enthusiasm of the Vietnamese, that the city is 1,000 years old and it went through so much tragedy during the war. I asked questions like, did you ever think Hanoi would survive all the bombing it went through during the Vietnam War? And the Vietnamese would say, yes, we beat the Americans and their allies.
Rất tự hào về quân đội Việt Nam vì một dân tộc đã chiến thắng mọi lực lượng muốn đè bẹp đất nước Việt Nam. Thì dân Việt Nam rất hiền hậu nhưng mà sẵn sàng đánh trả mọi kẻ thù xâm lược.
When I was in Vietnam in 1973 during the war, I was taken on a tour of the city just after the heavy bombing that the Americans had done on Hanoi to get them back to the peace talks in Paris. I went to a hospital that had been bombed, accidentally, the Americans said. The doctors and nurses were doing operations in the theatres, in the operating theatres, and it was the monsoon season. So the rain, because the roofs were all gone, the rain's pouring into the operating theatres and the doctors and nurses are operating with plastic over the people. Could you imagine that? The Vietnam War's been over for a long time now, but it takes a very long time for any country to get back on their feet. And Vietnam is starting to.
I've never seen so many people like it coming out for the last night of the festivities in Hanoi.
Thousands of people came in from the countryside who'd never been to Hanoi before. They came in for the celebrations, and they came to the War Museum to see the American planes that the North Vietnamese shot down. They had their photographs taken in front of some of these planes. They said they felt very proud that the North Vietnamese army had shot these planes out of the sky. I met this lovely woman, Mrs. Tu, who remembers the bombing of Hanoi in the 60s and 70s and how the North Vietnamese shot down the American planes. She invited me into a house for a cup of tea, and we sat down and had a nice chat.
Kỳ diệu, phải thấy là cái sức sống của dân tộc Việt Nam là kỳ diệu, không thể tưởng tượng cái sự vươn lên của họ. Chứ còn nói thật, trong những cái lúc bom đạn ấy thì quần áo chẳng có. Độc nhất là gọi là có một vài bộ đi làm mã thế thôi, chứ đi dạy học thế thôi, chứ còn khó khăn lắm. Nhưng mà bây giờ thì nói thật là sung sướng vô cùng. Tôi phải nói, tất nhiên là chúng tôi sung sướng ở cái chỗ là chúng tôi có một cuộc sống lành mạnh.
Mrs. Tu has 3 children. 2 of them are doctors like her husband, and the other one is an engineer. She's got this wonderful old house right in the heart of Hanoi. It probably was worth maybe $10,000 during the war. Now it's been valued at 3 or 4 million. They need the money. Doctors don't get paid much in Vietnam, but they don't want to sell it because it's a family home that goes back many generations. The Vietnamese government put on a big parade outside Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum, very similar to a Soviet May Day parade.
Tự hào tham gia trong buổi lễ ngày hôm nay. Em cảm thấy được lòng yêu Tổ quốc hơn. Em cảm thấy mình rất vinh dự và hạnh phúc khi được sống trong những năm tháng của 1000 năm Thăng Long Hà Nội ạ. Tôi yêu Việt Nam. Yeah!
All the leadership was there, the President, the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister. Young people were dressed in the Viet Cong uniform, as the Viet Cong played a major part in winning the war for Vietnam. Wandering around the old French Quarter in Hanoi, of all the wonderful old silk shops and bits and pieces that you can buy, the beautiful crafts. I looked up at one shop, and there at the entrance was the American flag and the Vietnamese flag together. I never thought when I was there in '73 that I'd ever see that.
In North Vietnam, Nixon expanded the bombing raids to hit Hanoi itself.
And that's all very nice. But the suffering that went on before that, the carnage of people being killed, what for? I knew this war wouldn't go anywhere, particularly for the Vietnamese or the Americans. I knew it. And what did we prove in Vietnam by bombing it? Particularly Hanoi? Nothing. As the Vietnamese said to me, we've got to move on. We can't hold grudges against the Americans. If we're going to improve our country, we've got to work with America. And let's forgive, not forget, but move on. It's wonderful to see the Vietnamese at peace. The people are happy.